This film is inspired by the real-life theft of the Mona Lisa from the Louvre Museum in Paris. Not only does it have an exciting plot, but it also has a lighthearted atmosphere, making it an underrated heist film. The story takes place in Krakow, Poland. The protagonist, Cuma, is a master thief who was caught 3 years ago after a failed heist and sentenced to 4 years in prison. While Cuma was serving his sentence, his longtime associate, Gruby, received a big job. A mysterious client was willing to pay a high price for Poland's national treasure, Leonardo da Vinci's painting lady with an ermine. This painting was housed in a heavily guarded art museum. Only Cuma had the skills to steal it. So, Gruby bribed the prison doctor, allowing Cuma to be released on medical parole. After leaving prison, Cuma first sought out his old partner, Julian, hoping they could work together for one last job. He planned to take the money and escape abroad to start a new life. However, Julian refused Cuma's request. Since Cuma's imprisonment, Julian had turned over a new leaf. He attended night school to study law and even became a police officer. He advised Cuma to change his ways and live an honest life. But Cuma was determined. The reward was as high as 1 million euros. He couldn't pass up such a lucrative opportunity. Seeing Cuma's resolve, Julian said he would think about it before giving an answer. Cuma had no choice but to leave and return to a luxurious apartment, which Gruby had arranged as a temporary hideout for the job. That day, Gruby visited Cuma and told him that the Da Vinci painting would be sent to Japan for an exhibition the next day and would only return in 2 months. This meant Cuma had 2 months to prepare. As for the exact return date, Gruby didn't know. It was up to Cuma to find out. But how could he determine the exact date? That was no problem for Cuma. Because he was on parole, the police captain was worried he might return to his old ways, so he was required to report to the police station every 2 days. Cuma took advantage of this by secretly installing a tiny button-sized bug under the police captain's desk. Since the police would handle the security for the painting's return and transport it to the museum safely, Cuma could learn the exact return date by eavesdropping on the captain's daily conversations. Not long after, Julian finally agreed to cooperate with Cuma. It turned out that 3 years ago, when they were escaping from a heist, they could have gotten away successfully. However, halfway through, Julian insisted on stopping to use the restroom, which delayed their escape and led to Cuma's capture. Cuma took the fall for everything. Julian agreed to help this time to repay his debt to Cuma. Once Cuma had Julian on board, he shared his plan. He decided to strike when the painting was being transported back to the museum. After the theft, he would need 30 minutes to escape. But once the alarm sounded, the police would seal off the area within 3 minutes. To buy time and distract the police, Cuma had Julian find a forger to create an identical fake painting. Julian contacted the forger whom they had worked with before and quickly reached a deal. The forger claimed he could complete the replica in 20 days. However, because of his old age, he decided to work on it with his female apprentice Magda. With the forgery underway, the next step was scouting the escape route. Cuma and Julian entered the sewers through a well near the museum and quickly mapped out a plan. Next, Cuma recruited a new helper named Werbus. He had met Werbus through a cellmate while in prison. Cuma chose Werbus because he had previously worked in a mine and had access to explosives. Once Werbus obtained the explosives, Cuma instructed him to plant them on the ceiling of the sewer. Directly above that spot was the key intersection leading to the museum. Because they had to work discreetly, this operation would take about a month. Now, you might be wondering, why was Cuma planting explosives in the sewer? Did he have another plan? Let's keep watching to find out. The forgery would take 20 days, and installing the explosives would take a month. Once Cuma had arranged everything, all he had to do was stay at home, focus on eavesdropping on the police captain's conversations, and wait for the exact return date of the painting. Once he had that information, he could time everything perfectly. 2 months later, Cuma successfully overheard that the painting would return the next day. He quickly informed Julian and Werbus, instructing them to act immediately. By this time, the forger had finished the fake painting, and its quality was good enough to pass as the original. Werbus had also completed the installation of the explosives and marked the spot on the ground. The next day, Cuma and Julian hid in the sewers, waiting for the transport vehicle carrying the painting. Just as it was about to reach the intersection, Werbus suddenly drove a bus into the road, blocking the path and trapping the transport vehicle directly above the explosives. Cuma immediately detonated the explosives, causing the ground to collapse. The transport vehicle plunged into the sewer below. The police were completely caught off guard. They were so stunned and disoriented that it took them a while to even begin the rescue operation. Taking advantage of the chaos, Cuma and Julian swapped the real painting with the fake one and escaped successfully. When the police finally realized what had happened, they discovered that the framed painting was too large to be taken out through the sewer opening. They launched a thorough search of the sewer system and eventually found the painting wrapped in cloth. The police captain immediately ordered the painting to be sent to the museum for authentication while also having a crane remove the debris from the scene. He also called Julian to assist in the investigation. After all, Julian was now a police officer. Julian had taken the day off to help Cuma steal the painting. At this moment, he had just escaped with Cuma and was catching his breath inside a car when he received the captain's call. To avoid suspicion, he quickly pulled himself together and rushed to meet the captain. What a difficult situation for him. Meanwhile, the police captain soon received confirmation from the museum that the recovered painting was actually a forgery. But where was the real one? Since the sewer opening was too small, the real painting obviously hadn't been taken out that way. If it hadn't been removed, where could it have been hidden? At that moment, the police captain remembered a handheld video camera found at the scene. There had been a Japanese staff member on the transport vehicle. It was his first time in Poland, and he was very excited, filming everything along the way. When the vehicle fell into the sewer, the camera slipped from his hands but remained recording. By reviewing the footage, the captain saw two masked men removing the painting from the vehicle and fleeing in a hurry. But shortly after, the two men returned to the vehicle, did something inside, and then left again. The captain found this very suspicious. If they had already taken the painting, why did they come back? Could it be that they realized the painting couldn't be taken out and decided to hide it back in the vehicle? Thinking this, the police captain immediately took Julian to the junkyard to search for the painting. However, they arrived a little too late. By the time they got there, the painting had already been taken by two masked men. There was no doubt that these men were Cuma and Werbus. The police captain's deduction was spot on. Cuma had indeed miscalculated the painting's size, making it impossible to take it through the sewer. So he had improvised by hiding the painting back in the vehicle and retrieving it later. The police had fallen right into his trap. With the painting in hand, Cuma rewarded Werbus with a generous payout, sending him on his way. Then he and Julian, who was now off duty, returned to the apartment and called Gruby to collect the goods. When Gruby arrived, he carefully examined the painting and confirmed it was indeed the real one. Now that the painting was real, it was time to exchange it for money. But just as they were about to make the deal, Gruby suddenly hesitated. He wanted to delay the payment until the next day. Hearing this, Cuma was furious. He felt like he was being played and threatened to take the painting back. Unexpectedly, Gruby became agitated, suffered an asthma attack, and collapsed unconscious. Now, Cuma was in a panic. If Gruby died, who would buy the painting? If there was no buyer, had they stolen it for nothing? Frantically searching Gruby's belongings, Cuma found a list of wealthy collectors, each worth billions. With this new lead, Cuma and Julian left the half-dead Gruby behind and took the painting with them. It looked like they would have to sell the painting themselves. Julian began contacting the high-profile collectors on the list, sending out offers for the painting. Since both Cuma and Julian, one being a parolee and the other a police officer, couldn't risk exposing themselves, they decided to use the forger's female apprentice as their intermediary to handle the transaction. The transaction was completed, and the painting was sold for a high price of 16 million euros. Cuma, Julian, and Magda split the money equally. With his share secured, Cuma voluntarily returned to prison. He only had 1 more year left on his sentence, and after that, he would be a free man with a fortune waiting for him. Just as Cuma was walking through the prison gates, he suddenly turned to Julian, who had come to see him off, and asked,
The painting we sold, that wasn't the real one either, was it?
Julian gave a knowing smile and didn't deny it. As it turned out, Julian had truly reformed. He didn't want to see a national treasure being illegally bought and sold, so he secretly had the forger create 2 identical fakes. One of them was used to swap with the real painting, which was now safely back in the museum's collection. Then, when Cuma managed to steal what he thought was the real painting, Julian secretly switched it again with another forgery. The reason Gruby didn't notice the difference was that he had relied on microscopic photographs for verification, photos that had been provided by the forger himself. Of course, he wouldn't detect a forgery made by the same expert. After securing the real painting, Julian quietly placed it in the police captain's car. Even though Julian had pulled off this trick, Cuma didn't blame him. After all, he had already gotten his money, and in the end, everyone got what they wanted. So why not be happy about it? But what neither Cuma nor Julian knew was that the forger and his female apprentice Magda had actually made a total of 5 fakes. Besides the one that Cuma sold, they took advantage of the stolen painting scandal to secretly sell 3 more, making 10 times the money that Cuma and Julian had earned. As for the wealthy collectors who ended up with the fake paintings, well, they could only swallow their losses in silence. After all, buying a stolen national treasure was a crime in itself. Who would dare report it? Back in 1991, during the Mona Lisa theft case at the Louvre in Paris, some media reports strongly suggested that the painting recovered by the police was not the real Mona Lisa, but rather a near-perfect forgery created by a genius artist. Inspired by this idea, the director of this movie crafted this intricate, suspenseful, and humor-filled crime comedy based on Lady with an Ermine, the only Da Vinci painting ever left in Poland.